every single one of us is unique in how we metabolize food, how we metabolize nutrition, supplements, the toxins that we come in contact with. And so we have to keep in mind that everybody is an individual. So we are all a product of our genetic makeup, the external environment, and the internal environment. So what does that mean? The external environment is the obvious and not obvious. If I asked you, and I do this in my longer training, when I do my 3-day training, I ask people to write down how many chemicals they come in contact with over the course of, say, a day. And I have people think about the healthcare, personal care products that they use, the cleaning materials that they come in contact with, et cetera. And usually people come up with a number somewhere between 1 and occasionally I get someone who will say 50 because they know that some of their shampoos and stuff have a lot of stuff in them. But the research shows that actually we come in contact with somewhere around 85,000 chemicals every day. And so the external environment is extremely complex, and it includes things like electromagnetic fields, the chemicals that we come in contact with, the foods that we come in contact with, the stressors that we come in contact with. Our internal environment is how our body processes everything. So do we methylate, or are we not good methylators? Do we have a yeast overgrowth, or is our mitochondria working the way it's supposed to? Do we have inflammation? So all the things that are going on in an internal environment, some of which impact those genes and have a impact on how we are experiencing ourselves in the world. And all of this, of course, is connected to the brain, because the last time I checked, the brain and the body were connected to each other. So when we were all in school, certainly when I was in school, we didn't talk about any of this stuff, right? I studied people like Carl Jung and B.F. Skinner and Freud and some of the other systems theorists. And we talked a lot about psychotherapy and biopsychosocial and looking at the external social environment, but not so much the internal environment. And so this is where we're going now with nutrition psychiatry, is looking at the body and how the body is impacting the brain. So Dr. Thomas Insel was the director of the National Institute of Mental Health for years. And I wish I had his other quote. I have it sitting in this book next to me, but I don't want to take the time to look for it. But the quote that I have here is that the DSM-4 at the time, now 5, has 100% accuracy, but 0% validity, that it provides a perfect way to describe symptoms, but it has nothing to tell us about the underlying biology of what causes them. And that's really the crux of what we're going to talk about today. In his other quote, that I just read in this book that I'm reading, which, by the way, I highly recommend this book. It's called Brain Energy by Dr. Christopher Palmer. He talks about how all of our health issues and mental health issues are tied to mitochondria. It's very interesting. I'm actually loving this book. But he has a quote from Dr. Insel also, who after his retirement from the NIMH basically said, I've spent, I think, millions of dollars, multiple millions of dollars, and worked with some really cool scientists and came up with some really cool papers about how things work, but we still really don't understand how the brain works. So we are still trying to figure out why some people have anxiety and other people don't, and how all of this comes to play in our clients. So I want to just tell you, just before we go on to this, a story about I had a client who came into my office and she was crying. It was the first appointment. It was an intake, and she was crying the whole session. And basically she said, I can't get out of bed. I am forcing myself to get out of bed and go to work because I have to work. But on the weekends, I'm down for the count. I don't get up. She said, I haven't been intimate with my husband in I don't know how long. And I have these two special needs kids, and I have basically no desire to be with them, help them, do anything with them. And if you work with special needs kids like I do, you know that it can be exhausting for the parents, because the kids don't just need one thing. They often need many things. They often need a tutor, and they need speech therapy, and they need OT, and on and on and on. So parents are shuttling their kids not only to the fun stuff because they want them to have a more neurotypical experience, but also to all these other supports that they need. And so this mom was like, I'm out. I can't do this anymore. So I said to her, I know you came to talk about your feelings, but how do you feel about talking about nutrition? And she said, that would be okay. Now, I want to be clear about this. The reason that I asked her that question is because I've learned that a lot of times when people come in, they really do want to talk about their feelings. And so when I start shifting and talking about nutrition, they get a little irritated because they don't understand what the connection is. And so they'll say, like, I don't understand. Why are we talking about what I had for breakfast when I'm here to talk about how miserable I'm feeling? So I like to ask permission. She gave me permission. So you guys can put this in the chat room. How many, if you had a woman who came in, or a man for that matter, who came into your office and presented the way that she did, what would you diagnose her as? She has trouble getting out of bed. She's uninterested in her life. She's, sleeping all the time on the weekends. And I see that people are entering stuff in the chat room. I'm going to jump over to the chat room for just a second, because I'm sure I wanted to see, could be MDD, major depression. Good, of course, right? And why do we say that? We say that because we all are trained to look at the DSM. So I don't know if you guys realize that the DSM was not really originally created to help us to make diagnosis, but it became a moneymaker and a way to code things for insurance companies. So it has evolved into a way to look at a cluster of symptoms and make a diagnosis. So we literally jump to conclusions based on what people are presenting to us. And we go by self-report. We are the only part of the medical field that doesn't get to look at the part of the body, the brain, that we're treating. So of course, we would all diagnose with depression. So I said to her, I know that you're probably depressed. You're presenting with depression, but I also think that perhaps because you're feeling depressed, you're probably not eating properly. She said, well, that would be true. I said, so would you be willing to just do a little intervention? Let's look at what you're eating, and then let's do some changes in that and see how you're feeling. And she said she was willing to do that. And so we looked at her diet. We just did a basic self-report. And I said, what would you normally, what are you eating for breakfast, lunch, dinner, et cetera? And she was not eating much, especially on the weekends when she was sleeping so much, hardly eating at all. So I'm going to show you later, what our brain needs. And so if our clients aren't eating properly, they're not giving the brain what they need. It's like asking someone to build a house without giving them nails. Like the wood is just going to lean against it and just going to fall down. So we need to give them the tools, everything they need to make things work properly. So we tweaked her diet, and I asked her also to go to the doctor. And this is something I also do regularly with my clients, is I will ask them to go and get a physical if they haven't had one. And I want them to have certain things tested. I want lab work, very basic lab work done to start with, because it's covered by insurance. And I want to be respectful of people's resources. I want them to have a B12 study done, B12 checked. I want their vitamin D levels checked. I want a regular, just a plain old CBC. I want their thyroid checked. I want their hormones checked. And I have some specific requirements for the thyroid. So I asked her to do that. And I asked her to do the nutrition and then to come back in a couple of weeks. So she did. She came back in a few weeks and she said, first of all, my husband says, thank you for having my hormones checked to see if there's anything going on and why I don't have any sex drive. And secondly, she said, I can't believe by eating some meals, how much better I'm feeling. And I am able to get out of bed. and I am managing my house again. She said, I'm still a little bit down and I do want to talk about that, but I am feeling so much better. So I tell this story because I think, we all have a choice when someone presents to us and we look at that cluster of symptoms and we jump to blaming, naming, blaming, and taming. And what I might have done before I had studied nutrition is I might have said, let me recommend a couple of psychiatrists. Let's get you on some medication and see where we go from there. But what we really want to do is we want to look at biologically what's happening, because if there's something wrong, like if there's an autoimmune issue, if there is IBS, IBD, irritable bowel syndrome, irritable bowel disease, a yeast overgrowth, some sort of GI issue, we can do talk therapy, we can do DBT therapy, CBT, you name it, whatever therapies you guys use, we can do all of that and not help the person get better because it's a physical problem. So we have to look at both. We have to look at the mental health piece and we have to look at the biology piece.